Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that, well, it seems to pop up everywhere, doesn't it? From, our own heads, maybe, right up to the global stage. Narcissism.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to explore how it works both in individuals and, maybe more surprisingly, across entire cultures.
Looking at those connections, how it shapes things.
Exactly. How it shapes pretty much everything around us, from politics to, well, personal relationships.
And our goal, like always, is really to get right to the heart of it, give you a solid grasp of these sometimes pretty complex ideas without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Right. We know you're looking for that knowledge that just clicks.
Yeah, the aha moments.
Yeah.
And we aim to deliver just that. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Perfect. And we've pulled together a really interesting, diverse set of sources for this deep dive. We'll be looking at Sumdet's insights on cultural narcissism,
From Embrace Inner Chaos, yeah.
Perrine Sahat on individual change from well-beings counseling. Then there's a fascinating comparison of sort of clinical versus social views of narcissism by Miller and Campbell.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Distinguishing the different takes.
Definitely. And Dr. Anthony Mazzella's work on how narcissists see partners as extensions.
Which is quite chilling, actually.
It really is. An anthropological angle on identity cannibalism, great term, by Mancini, Urso, and Stangolini.
Intriguing.
We've also got some points from a Reddit discussion about narcissism in social movements, which is quite thought-provoking.
Right. The motivations behind joining causes.
And finally, Healthy Place's explanation of the sort of compulsive behaviors you sometimes see linked to narcissism.
So quite a range. Our mission then is basically to pull the key pieces from all of this. We want to understand what really defines both cultural and individual narcissism, what the real possibilities are for personal change, if any.
That's the big question.
It really is. And ultimately, what impact all this has on our relationships and, the wider world.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks then. What exactly is narcissism? It gets thrown around a lot, but our sources help distinguish, normal self-confidence from something more problematic.
That's such a key starting point.
Yeah.
Well, beings counseling really clarifies it. Look, we all have moments of pride, right, or enjoy getting some recognition.
Yeah.
But narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, that's fundamentally different. It's this persistent pattern. Feeling hugely important, needing constant admiration.
That narcissistic supply idea.
Exactly, that constant need for validation from others, and crucially, a real lack of empathy for other people. These aren't just quirks. They seriously mess with a person's ability to function day to day.
Right, not just an annoying trait, but genuinely impairing.
Yeah.
And then scaling that up. Some Dutt introduces this idea of cultural narcissism. That's a really compelling concept.
It is. Embrace Inner Chaos basically argues it's like a societal level ego.
Wow.
Yeah. It influences how whole countries, large groups, interact. It shapes international relations, cultural policies, our global views of ourselves, and, well, everyone else.
So how does that actually show up? How does cultural narcissism manifest? Dutt lays out some pretty interesting signs. The first one is a cultural superiority complex. That sounds pretty toxic right off the bat.
Well, what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is how deep it can run.
Yeah.
Embrace Inner Chaos says it's this systematic undervaluing of cultures seen as, non-dominant.
Systematic. So it's built into things.
Exactly. Not just casual opinions. It shows up in education systems, how media portrays different cultures, even official government narratives. A classic example they give is cultural appropriation, where elements of a less dominant culture are just taken, used without real understanding or respect for their origins or the people behind them. So yeah, at its core, it involves treating other cultures as somehow inherently lesser.
Gosh, that makes you think how often we might see that without even really clocking it. Dutt also mentions ritualized comparison frameworks. Sounds like setting up biased rules for interaction.
Precisely. Culturally, narcissistic societies tend to create these unspoken hierarchies when they interact with other cultures.
Unspoken.
Yeah, they position their own values, their norms, as the standard. The yardstick everyone else gets measured against. So instead of a genuine exchange,
It's a performance.
it becomes a performance, exactly, where the narcissistic culture tries to demonstrate its supposed superiority. It's sometimes called asymmetric dialogue, basically, a conversation where one side's view is automatically prioritized, real equal exchange. Impossible.
So less about connecting, more about constantly trying to prove you're better. Then there's collective identity grandiosity. Sounds like a nation with a massively inflated ego.
If you link it back to the individual level, it's like a whole country just pucking itself up, exaggerating its wins, while conveniently, forgetting its failures or less savory parts. Embrace Inner Chaos points out how they often create these glorified national stories, myths almost, selectively highlighting triumphs, omitting the awkward bits.
Like a national highlight reel, leaving out the bloopers.
Exactly. Think about those national myths of exceptionalism. Very selective memory on a huge scale.
And this grandiosity even affects how these cultures treat minority cultures within their own borders. There's this phrase, exploitative consumption of minority cultural products. Sounds quite bad.
It is problematic. What's disturbing is how these dominant cultures can eagerly take and, well, commodify elements from minority groups.
Make money off them.
Make money, gain cachet, whatever, while at the same time marginalizing or dismissing the actual people who created them. It's about extracting value without credit, without understanding context. Kind of mirrors the individual narcissist maybe taking credit for someone else's idea.
It's a one-way street. No respect, no recognition flowing back. Okay. Dutt also talks about attention economy dominance tactics, like creating huge cultural spectacles, for the world stage. What's the goal there?
Well, the main goal is to dominate global attention.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Okay.
Culturally narcissistic societies get very sophisticated with national branding, using symbols, carefully chosen ones, to sort of simplify complex realities into easy images for global consumption.
It's marketing a country.
It is, but it's more than just tourism ads. It's about shaping global perceptions, gaining influence, maybe without needing overt displays of power. Soft power, but with a narcissistic edge.
Crafting an image to get leverage. And this desire for dominance extends to controlling information. Information monopolization strategies.
Yeah, this is about systematically controlling the key channels for global cultural talk.
Yeah.
Think major news outlets, influential universities, international bodies.
The gatekeepers.
Exactly. By dominating these platforms, they can position themselves as the authority, shape how different cultures are seen and understood. It's like the individual narcissist controlling the narrative in their own family or social circle.
Steering the global conversation. Then there's zero-sum status competition. The idea that if you gain status, I lose it. How does that play out culturally?
Embrace Inner Chaos explains, this can lead to things like heritage being treated almost like a luxury good. Its value becomes about prestige, not meaning. And even worse sometimes is deliberate sabotage of competing cultural narratives.
How so?
Narcissistic cultures might actively try to discredit other perspectives, dismissing non-Western knowledge as just folklore, for instance. It's a relentless pursuit of perceived superiority, often at the expense of genuine connection or respect.
So stay on top by pushing others down. Dutt also flags reality distortion frameworks, like state-sponsored historical revisionism. That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It really is. These systems will systematically rewrite history, using state power, to maintain a flattering self-image.
So not just interpretation.
No, it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
Deliberate manipulation, suppressing inconvenient truths in schools, museums, official events. It's the societal version of the individual narcissist rewriting their own past to always be the hero.
Wow.
And this often links to what's called a nostalgia industrial complex, which actually profits from selling these idealized versions of the past that frankly never existed.
They're actively fabricating a past to suit the present. Okay, the last two signs Dutt highlights. Pervasive victimhood entitlement and blame externalization mechanisms. Sounds like avoiding accountability.
That's exactly it. Cultural narcissists can weaponize historical suffering almost, turn it into a kind of moral currency, engaging in what some have called competitive oppression Olympics on the world stage.
Okay.
There's also trauma capitalism, where past grievances are commodified for present gain.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, when things go wrong internally, the go-to move is blaming external groups, scapegoating, creating this shared paranoid delusion where internal failures are always someone else's fault.
A constant cycle of deflection and playing the victim, but on a massive scale. That does make a really crucial distinction, though, between all this and, healthy national pride.
Oh, absolutely. That's vital.
Yeah.
Healthy national pride celebrates achievements, acknowledges the good and the bad, hopefully in a balanced way. It includes respect for other cultures.
Right.
Cultural narcissism, on the other hand, demands recognition of superiority. It inherently devalues others.
Yeah.
The key difference is how other cultures are treated with genuine respect or with dismissal.
These are some really powerful and, yeah, sometimes unsettling patterns. Let's shift focus now, zoom in on the individual level. Our sources help us see it's not just about being loud and grabbing attention, right?
Precisely. Miller and Campbell's work comparing different ways psychologists understand narcissism is great here. They highlight the distinction between overt or grandiose narcissism.
The classic stereotype.
Yeah, the stereotypical boastful look at me type. But then there's covert or vulnerable narcissism.
Okay, what's that like?
It's often expressed much more subtly. Manipulation, maybe playing the victim to get sympathy and control. Both stem from that deep need for validation, but they look really different on the surface. Well, beings counseling touches on this too.
So it's not always the person demanding the spotlight. Sometimes it's the one who seems maybe the most fragile. Dr. Mazzella's research on partners as extensions of the self is also key here. That sounds like a total blurring of boundaries.
It is, and what's really striking is the underlying fear that drives it. Fear of separation.
Ah.
By seeing their partner as like an inseparable part of them, they create this false sense of security. They try to avoid the anxiety of potential loss or abandonment.
So that's why they might fight a partner's independence.
That's often why, yes, a partner getting a promotion, having separate friends, anything that implies separateness can feel deeply threatening. It's not just about control for convenience. It's about maintaining that illusion of a merged identity to manage their own fear.
Controlling the partner to control their own inner world. This also connects maybe to that concept of identity cannibalism from Mancini, Urso, and Stangolini. Very vivid term.
It is vivid, but it captures something powerful. How narcissistic individuals might sort of absorb aspects of others to prop up their own fragile sense of self.
How does that work?
It's like adopting characteristics, achievements, even mannerisms of people around them to feel more complete or maybe more superior. Essentially absorbing parts of others into their own identity structure.
Like they're constantly trying to fill an inner void by borrowing bits from other people, and this might fuel some of those compulsive acts that Healthy Place talks about.
Absolutely. Healthy Place explains that beneath the confident facade, there are often deep feelings of inadequacy, maybe guilt, leading to a need for punishment or just relief. This can manifest as compulsive behaviors, driven by what they call the false self, that persona they project, and a punishing superego, their internal critic. These acts, whether it's constant attention-seeking or even self-sabotage, often don't bring real joy. They serve to reduce anxiety or fulfill some unconscious need for self-punishment.
So even negative behaviors can be attempts, maybe unconscious ones, to manage this internal conflict. Healthy Place also notes these acts are often framed within a grandiose narrative. What does that mean?
It means that even when they're doing something compulsive, like excessive shopping or substance use maybe, the narcissist will often spin a story around it.
Ah, the narrative again.
Always the narrative,
Yeah.
elevating the act. Maybe they see themselves as a connoisseur or uniquely able to handle it. It's about maintaining that sense of specialness, control, and constantly seeking that narcissistic supply, that admiration fix.
It's never just doing something. It has to feed the inflated self-image. Okay, let's think about how these tendencies play out in the real world. Specifically, social movements, based on that Reddit discussion. It raised some interesting questions about motivations.
Yeah, what's intriguing there is the idea that, well, not everyone joining a movement is purely driven by selfless ideals.
Right.
The Reddit discussion, referencing a study linking narcissistic grandiosity to LGBTQ activism, and we're just reporting the study's findings here, not endorsing a view, suggests that for some individuals, participation might also serve to boost their self-image.
How so?
Maybe gaining social approval within a movement that's often seen, rightly or wrongly, as morally righteous, getting that validation hit.
So it makes you wonder, is everyone truly committed to the cause itself, or some maybe they're partly for personal gain for that supply? This leads us straight to the big one. Can narcissists actually change? Well, Beings Counseling had some thoughts.
Yeah, and the crucial point seems to be, genuine change is possible, but, and it's a big but, it demands huge commitment and self-awareness from the person themselves.
They have to want it.
They have to want it, and they have to acknowledge their harmful behaviors. Therapy can definitely help manage narcissistic traits, but NPD is seen as a personality disorder. It's not something you can just cure completely. Progress is often slow. Setbacks happen.
So managing behaviors, not necessarily changing the core personality.
That seems to be the more realistic goal, yes. Managing rather than eliminating.
Okay. What factors might actually help someone with narcissistic traits move towards change?
Well, the source suggests maturity, simply aging, can sometimes lead to more self-reflection, but, no guarantees.
Right.
Experiencing significant losses of relationships, jobs can also be a catalyst, a wake-up call, potentially. Crises can create opportunities for growth, but again, the individual has to choose to seize them.
It really sounds like the motivation has to be internal. What about therapy? You mentioned it helps manage things. Are there specific approaches?
Yes. Well-being's counseling mentions a few. Transference-focused therapy, schema therapy, and metacognitive interpersonal therapy.
Okay.
These basically aim to help the person understand their emotions and relationship patterns better, challenge those unhelpful core beliefs they have about themselves and others, and develop healthier ways of coping and interacting.
But there must be huge obstacles to that kind of change.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A major one is often just lack of self-awareness. Many narcissists genuinely don't think they have a problem. They blame others.
Right. Defensiveness?
Huge defensiveness against any criticism.
Right.
Plus, that fragmented sense of self, the heavy reliance on external validation, it all makes looking inward really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it just takes time. A lot of time and consistent effort for meaningful progress.
A long, tough road. And the message for loved ones seems pretty clear. You can't force it.
Exactly. Loved ones can offer support, maybe acknowledge positive steps, definitely set clear boundaries against harmful behavior. Absolutely crucial. But the person with narcissistic tendencies has to make the choice. The main focus for people in those relationships needs to be their own self-care, their own boundaries, protecting themselves.
So pulling it all together, we see these patterns: grandiosity, lack of empathy, attention-seeking, playing out both culturally and individually. How might a culturally narcissistic society actually encourage or reflect individual narcissism? Is there a feedback loop?
That's a really important connection. It seems highly likely, doesn't it? A culture that constantly values superiority, external validation, needing to be seen as the best, it could inadvertently foster or reinforce those same traits in individuals.
Yeah.
If those traits are celebrated, rewarded by society, by the narratives we tell, individuals might be more likely to adopt them.
Like the culture creates fertile ground for it, and the
Right.
impact of these behaviors, societal or personal, on relationships seems pretty devastating across the board.
Yeah, our sources consistently point to the harm. Broken trust, emotional abuse, exploitation, just a lack of real connection, whether it's personal relationships or international ones. And setting boundaries, as well-being's counseling stresses, is just essential for self-protection.
Absolutely. And even though some of the more overt behaviors might lessen with age, that Reddit discussion mentioned an aging study,
Right.
that fundamental sense of self-importance often seems to stick around.
That does suggest that while the expression might change, the underlying drivers can be really deeply ingrained. And finally, it's worth remembering, like Miller and Campbell pointed out, that psychologists look at narcissism in different ways.
Right, the clinical versus social view.
Yeah. Clinical measures might capture more distress, more internal struggle, while social personality measures, like the famous NPI, often tap into more resilient, outgoing, maybe even superficially charming aspects. But both usually point to difficulties in relationships. An antagonistic style often comes through regardless.
So, however it looks on the surface, however we measure it, those core challenges in relating to others seem pretty consistent.
Wow, this has been a really illuminating deep dive.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So, just to summarize quickly, we've seen how cultural narcissism shapes society's interactions and self-perception, mirroring individual patterns of grandiosity and validation seeking. While individual NPD is tough to change, managing behaviors is possible with immense self-awareness and effort. Recognizing these patterns, both big and small, seems crucial for navigating our relationships and just understanding the world.
And hopefully this journey through the sources has given you some of those aha moments, without feeling completely overloaded. It really is fascinating how these seemingly separate things, individual psychology and broad cultural trends, are so tangled up together.
It really is. So here's something to maybe chew on. Given how common narcissistic traits seem at both levels, individual and cultural, how can we actively foster more self-awareness, more genuine empathy?
How do we move towards interactions that are more balanced, more truly reciprocal, not just in our own lives, but maybe on a global scale too?
And what role does critical thinking play?
Yeah. In challenging those big, culturally narcissistic narratives, and also in holding individuals accountable for harmful behaviors.
Yeah, lots to think about there.
Definitely. We encourage you to mull that over, maybe even dig into some of the sources we talked about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.